Okay, now just for purposes of, you know, letting you take a look at some of the big rocks I got around here. That's some of them. Now here's one that came out of the desert that most people wouldn't even recognize, but it does have a clear dish in there that's, you know, lowered and smoothed. Now here's one that I've got a bunch of North Carolinian, just, you know, quarry stones and whatnot on. But and there's that's another matati. I got another one here that was kind of, thought he wanted to be a semi-railed matati, but I don't know what happened. And then I think I showed you this one here. Anyway, all total, I've got probably almost, I think I've got almost 40 matatis and bowls that are more or less, or at least enough intact that you can tell what you're looking at. Here's a couple of more of the ones from out in the desert. You can, I don't know if you can tell how big some of those are. Believe it or not, I humped those things out on my back for several miles to get back to where, as close as I could get my pickup to them. Now here's one that I found by looking over the fence on a friend of mine's patio down in Santa Monica, and the guy next door was using this thing here, which is, you know, beautiful granite. It is, you know, that black and white, real speckled, sparkly granite. Was using it for a flower pot. And I asked him if he knew anything about it, and he said nope, he had inherited the house from his grandmother, and it had been there, and it didn't even like to grow plants. He said whatever you put in there died, and so it was just sitting there with kind of a dead-looking cactus in it when I got it. And I said, well, listen, man, I'd really like to have that. Could I trade you a real nice flower pot for it? And the guy said, sure. And so he and I we went to Pottery Barn, and I was hoping like heck none of my friends would see me in there shopping pots in Pottery Barn with this guy. But he had to look at, he was a very dramatic fellow, and he had to look at every impossible to find pot in the place before he found the one that he was going to trade me. But by the end of the day, a sore back later, I had this whomperdinger here in the back of my truck heading home. It was so big we couldn't even lift it. The only way we could lift this thing is I went home and I got a post, and it's got a hole. It's this one's worked all the way through the bottom. I don't think you can see it, but no, you can't really see it, but it is. It's got a hole that goes all the way through it. And so we shoved an iron fence post through there, and then use that to be able to get good purchase, because there's, you know, big old round thing like this, there's just no way to get a handle on it. You know, it needs to come with handles. But me and another friend of mine about broke our backs throwing that thing in the back of the truck. And I mean, things like this are why you really hate to ever move again. And this thing here doesn't look it now, but is actually a very beautiful matati. When we moved in here, I was in the hospital, so my son did all the moving. He's 21 and strong as a bull. But he threw it in upside down, so I just noticed it the other day. I went, geez, that looks like the back of the bottom side of one of my matatis. And I flipped it over, and it had been laying there buried in the dirt about 3 inches. That's how come you still see fresh dirt hanging on it. And here's a matati that I just loved. It, you know, it's got that really typical, if you're actually ever going to get into hunting for matatis, most people like to think they're going to find this round perfect oval every time, but realistically this kind of almond shape here is much more common, and I think they liked it because they could sit cross-legged and then kind of have the cross in their legs, you know, snug right up to this end over here. As you notice, the vast majority of the matatis that I've got that are out of, you know, big chunks of, that are, you know, not really super finished, have got a real sharp kind of corner on one side. And I need to dump that water out of there because it's going to make the bottom of my matati look ugly. But now I just want to visit these two long Manos again, because for one thing I forgot to mention is that this, I believe, to the best of my knowledge, is a type of artifact that is almost unknown to the archaeology world around here. I have never read anywhere. I've read virtually every book on California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and northern Mexico about, type of grinding tools, and nowhere do I see any pictures or hear anything about these giant, long French bread style manos. But they're really cool, and they're not that heavy to hump out if you're only, taking a couple with you when you go. Okay, listen, I'm going to go back in the house, and I got one more. I like to throw in a wild and crazy artifact at the end of my videos here, so I'm going to throw in one. I'm going to go get it right now, so hang with me. Okay, now I'm not talking about these things here. I shot my mouth off and laughed at Mr. Rick's ugliest point in his ugliest point contest, and he said, okay, then put your money where your mouth is. You're just gonna laugh at mine. So these here are gonna be my next video that's gonna be the ugliest points ever. But I'd just like for you to take a look at what I've got here twirling in my hands. This is a core, and it's an obsidian core that from I think the Aztec style of doing things, where they knocked off little tiny bladelets all the way around this guy. And now, before they were done with it, someone else took and just knocked off two big ones off of this end and used it as a chisel. But prior to that, this had probably been, a nice core all the way out to about here where my thumb is. And just notice, there is not a step fracture in a single one of these flakes. These guys were knocking off flakes that traveled the entire length of this core, being no more than about a 1/4 inch wide. And I have sat around and started with a big chunk of obsidian, and I'm a fairly good napper, and I have tried to just duplicate this thing here. And it's impossible. You just cannot. There's no way I can do it. They knew some kind of skills and tricks and whatnot that I don't have a clue of. And of course, this was the culture that made little tiny bladelets out of obsidian and attached those inside their war clubs and things like that. And probably used them for 1,000 other things that we don't use now. But anyway, that's my kind of wild and freaky artifact for the end, for all those that were patient enough to listen to me stumble over my words this long. Thanks a lot, YouTubers.